I've been involved in many things. You can imagine, if I've been here since I was 4 years old in the South Bronx, the poorest urban congressional district in the United States, and still the poorest urban congressional district, which that might change because the way they redistricted it, that we now have parts of Riverdale. That's another story for another day, and we'll discuss that another time. But right now, the fact of growing up here, you can understand why I've been an activist, and I've been blessed that I've had the fortitude, I've had the strength and the courage to be able to do certain things, and sometimes the stupidity. Because sometimes I just said things without knowing that I was getting involved in bigger things. Like when I said, oh, we should run against this woman because she never answers our calls and she never responded to the fact that they're building a homeless shelter around the corner and that's supposed to be our representative, and not even respond to our calls, respond to our letters, respond to anything. Bullshit. She shouldn't be there. Somebody says, yo, we should run against her. Everybody said, yeah. And they said, Julio, you're the only one, because nobody else could. Everybody's working somewhere else. I have my own business and I don't get any money from the city. So I was like the only one that could run because of my big mouth that I said somebody should run against this person. I wound up being the candidate. So unfortunately, sometimes you have to be careful what you say, because then you'll be the one doing the work. And I'm sure it might happen to a lot of people. So I've been involved in a lot of things. And one of the things that I got involved in that I feel very good about, I feel good about a lot of the things that I did. And another one that I did that was, again, involved, not that I looked for it, was the fact that my son graduates from Wesleyan University, comes to New York City. He gets a little part-time job making some money, him and his girlfriend, and they get an apartment in my building, 888 Grand Concourse. And my son goes out to buy a sandwich on 161st Street. He leaves without a wallet. He leaves with just $5 in his pocket. And he meets a doorman, and the doorman's also going out for lunch, and they go out together, and they walk to 161st Street, and when they get to the corner, the doorman tells my son, yo, wait here, man, I'm gonna go upstairs and, pick up a nickel bag. So they go upstairs, the guy goes upstairs, my son waits for him in front of the bank, Chase Manhattan Bank, 161st Street. The guy comes down. When he comes down, 2 cop cars, boom, blocked them from crossing the street, and they tell both of them to empty out your pockets. Now, you know the law, New York City, you can have a joint, you can have a nickel bag, you have whatever in your pocket. That's not illegal. But if you show it, that's illegal. So the cops do that, and that's how they used to do a lot of overtime. They go into the projects, and you see at 11 o'clock at night, guys are playing basketball, in the project. You know somebody they got a joint. You know somebody they got a nickel bag. Because like what New York is now, that now it's legal and everybody's smoking, well, that shit's been happening for years here, except it wasn't legal. So if a cop who's a rookie, who has a house in Long Island or upstate New York, has to pay a mortgage, and the starting salary is not high enough, you want to get a lot of overtime. When you get overtime, you get collars. You got to stay, right? Paperwork and all that shit. So I know, because I have a lot of friends who were cops that were pissed off at this. These guys go into projects, 12, 15 guys playing basketball, you stop them and you line them all up because somebody called and said that they were making too much noise or they heard something. And you have them all lined up. You tell them, empty out your pockets, supposedly because they're looking for weapons or whatever. But that's bullshit. That's bullshit. But none of these kids are taught the law. You don't have to, empty out your pockets. But they don't know. So because they know they don't have no guns and shit, so they empty out their pockets. And if one of them of the 12 have a nickel bag or joint, all 12 get arrested. So that rookie cop has now 12, reports to do. He got a lot of overtime. So that's the deal behind all this. Bottom line, my son gets arrested, and my son says, wait a minute, I didn't do anything. I'm just standing here and waiting for my friend. But the other guy gets nervous. He opens up his hand, and there's a nickel bag. So they both have to be arrested. And the cop is telling my son, look, I got to take you in. That's the law. And my supervisors are out there in one of those vans looking at us. So I can't let you go. But don't worry, you're just going to be charged with, trespassing or something. So my son goes, and he explains to me how they went to all different places, and they filled up the van. It's like going around shopping. And they fill up the van, bring him to the freaking precinct. They never let him make a phone call. And because I know police officers, my son had a card. At least he had that card with him that has the shield of one of our friends who's a cop. And the back of the card has the guy's cell number. He said, yo, if you ever get into any trouble with the cops, man, give them this. Tell them to call me. Because we know cops that are good. They're really down-to-earth, decent individuals. This guy says, oh, everybody can get that card. You know, didn't let my son make no phone call, never verified anything. His girlfriend is like worried because she comes home at 7 o'clock. My son went out at 12. The door's open, the TV's on. My son is nowhere around. We're going through changes. I'm thinking, oh, he's just hanging out with some friends. He probably went to play basketball. So he'll be back in the evening. 11 o'clock comes, still no word from my son. Now I'm worried. Thinking, what the hell's going on? I had to get a flashlight, go to the building, because sometimes we cross over the building. He was in the 5th floor, and I live on the 6th floor, the other side of the building. And sometimes instead of going down and going back up, you just cross over the roof and come down. So I'm thinking maybe he went up there and there was some hoods up there. Maybe he got into some scuffle. You know, maybe my son is injured somewhere. Maybe he's down on a fire escape, hurt. Maybe he's down there, he fell. Maybe they threw him off the roof. You don't know what the hell thinking. You're thinking all this shit. Man, we go through all these changes. I make all my phone calls to friends of mine who are cops and people who work in emergency rooms to see if, did my son get hit by a car? He had no idea and they don't know where he's at. So I have my friends do the research, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, I get a call from one of my friends that says, oh, your son's been arrested. I said, arrested? He says, yes, he's at the son such and such a precinct. Bro, I get up, boom, I go straight to the precinct. I know the precinct. I know the community affairs people. I've been involved in this community all this time. I'm constantly doing stuff. I go and speak to the community affairs person. Her name was Estrella, Star in Spanish. And she's like, Julio, what's going on? I said, listen, my son was arrested. Supposedly he's here. I want to know, well, how the hell my son get arrested? So I'm really upset. So she says, calm down. We're going to find out what the deal is. And she goes and she comes back. She says, yo, your son was arrested on possession of narcotics with intent to sell. I said, what? I said, that's bullshit, Estrella. You know that shit. My son just graduated from Western University. How the fuck he's going to be coming here? Possession? Look, my son smokes weed. That's a fact. My whole family smokes weed. But the fact of him, narcotics, this is bullshit. So she says, relax, Julio. I'll bring the police officers down so they can talk to you. And she brings down 2 police officers, a female Boricua and an African-American dude. And they both were trying to appease me, telling me that sometimes as parents, we don't know what our children are really doing. And that my son was arrested for narcotics with intent to sell. I said to them, both of them, both of you, bullshit. And I can't believe that I busted my butt when I was younger because I wanted to be a cop, and I couldn't be a cop because I'm only 5'6" 3/4. You had to be 5'7" or 8. And I wanted to be a cop, and I fought so much to be able to get people like you who are brown and black to get into the police force. And now you guys are treating our community just like the whites treated us. Oh, Mr. Pavon, calm down. Seriously speaking, listen, the fact is that, sometimes we just don't know what our children do. But, when the trial comes, he'll be tomorrow. He's going to be arraigned, and you'll notice it. I said, what? I said, listen, I was fed up, but at least I knew that my son was safe. He was going to go. So we go to the central booking. The first, in the morning, in the court, we sit there, his mother and I, and they bring up his number. He comes up. He sees us. He's a little bit happy. We're smiling at him. His attorney, another Wesleyan graduate who worked for the legal defenders, she took up the case because they were students together. My son was also a student with Lin-Manuel. My son was the one that played Usmael in The Heights, who should have been in the play but didn't want to go into that side. He wanted to go behind the scene with the cameras. So these guys, they already got their plans. They're doing positive things. They ain't about no selling drugs and all that bullshit. So we're there looking at my son. He comes in, right? And the judge, when he looks at my son's record, he says, possession of narcotics with intent to sell? He says, this kid doesn't even have a desk appearance ticket. This kid has never been arrested for anything. And all he had in his pocket was $5. And he had nothing in his pocket. He says, this is not, boom, I'm throwing this out. I'm just going to give you a desk appearance ticket. Stay clean for a year and you'll be okay. And he turned around, and the attorney turned around and looked at us. I said, no, we're not going to get a desk appearance ticket either. He didn't do anything. He shouldn't have anything. In case you don't know, a desk appearance ticket you get when it's something minor. You jumped over the turnstile. You were in a corner and a cop was beating up on somebody. You say, yo, get the fuck off of him, man. What you doing? Yeah, disturbing the peace, resisting arrest on someone. You get a desk appearance ticket for that. You know, you can get a desk appearance ticket for a whole bunch of minor stuff. But here's what happened. Like what happened to Jamal. You get 2 desk appearance tickets, now you got to come in. And if you don't have money for bail, like he didn't, the kid who was 16 years old got busted for a backpack that he didn't steal, couldn't afford $5,000 bail, winds up going to, Rikers for 2.5 years, got raped, beaten, and whatever. He comes out because they finally realized he was innocent. But he had been through so much trauma, he killed himself. This was after my son. That happened afterwards. But prior to that, I already knew. A desk appearance ticket? Bullshit. He didn't do anything. So the judge got angry. But the attorney told the judge, I'm sorry. My client does not want to take a desk appearance ticket. And his parents don't want to take a desk appearance ticket. So the judge got angry. He slammed the gavel. He said, well, I guess we'll see if you're really that innocent. Let's see. Go to trial. Right? On the bullshit charge. So it took 2.5 years for my son to be able to go to trial. A kid who just graduated from Wesleyan, who all he did was to walk down the corner to buy a sandwich. And now because he has a trial pending, he can't leave New York City. So he's an intern working with companies that are doing film. If they want to go to South Jersey Shore to film the sun coming up for, B-roll for a movie, he can't go. Because if he goes and he spends 1 or 2 days there filming and the case comes up in court, that's a violation. You didn't show up. So he has to be here. So my son was tied, not able to do some of the things that he was able to do, that he should have done to be able to move himself into the career that he chose. I have a friend who's a judge, Judge Tapia, and when I told him about it, he said, yo, come see me in my chambers. I go see him in the chambers, and he tells me exactly that. He said, look, I personally believe that that's bullshit. It's called the, blindfold law. I said, what's that? And he explained to me that there's a law in New York State that the district attorneys do not have to give evidence at time of arraignment. Imagine somebody accuses you or anyone of doing a crime. No evidence, but accuses you. The police have a right to go after you because of whatever the accusation is, right? They don't know the deal. They just know that there's an accusation on you. But when they book you, that's when, in order for them to book you, there had to have been some evidence. There had to have been something. Is it a woman who just said that she don't like you and she said you raped her? Did she go to the hospital? Was there semen? Is there something there? Whatever it is, they don't have to say anything. They don't have to say anything. It's at time of trial. How long does it go? How much time you need to go to trial in New York? 2 years. So if you're poor, guess what? You're going to Rikers. If you're not poor, you better come up with bail, depending on what the charge is. Like with Jamal, it's only a simple charge. He lives in the projects, $5,000. But $5,000 for a lot of people, you don't have to give $5,000. Just give half, $2,500. But if you don't have that, if you're poor, you ain't got that either. In my son's case, no bail, no credit. No history of any cases in court. Not even a traffic ticket. Nothing. Graduate from Wesleyan. Whoa, how are you going to hold this kid with bail? So no bail. He walks out with us that morning, but his life is changed because of the fact that for 2 years he can't go and pursue his career. So I go to meet with this judge, and he tells me the same thing. And he says, we should organize to, definitely change that law. And we started an organization called Discovery for Justice. And we spent almost 2 years meeting every Tuesday for 2 years, organizing. And next thing we knew, man, a lot of people, oh my God. Everywhere we went and we spoke about this, people will come up to us and say, yo, that happened to my brother. Yo, that happened to my father. Yo, that happened to my cousin. Yo, that happened to my sister. A lot of people who came up to us, people who had to plead guilty, because if you're in Rikers for something you didn't do, but you have to wait for trial, hey, your lady is telling you, papá, alguien tiene que comprar la leche al nene. Yo no tengo chavo. Yo no puedo quedarme aquí sin ti. Tú tienes que salir de aquí, pero que yo no puedo salir. I have to leave. I'm not going to leave. They come to you and say, listen, if you plead to this, a lesser charge, you can walk out tomorrow. But if you don't, if you want to go to trial, it's going to take about another maybe year. You're going to be here for another year. Fuck it, give me the paper, I'll sign. They sign. Because of what the charge is, depending on the charge, guess what? You can't stay in the projects. You got to leave. You can't get a student loan. You can't join the armed forces. You can't even get insurance. People don't know that, depending on the charge. And we found a lot of that was going on in our community. A lot of innocent kids were going to jail. A lot of innocent kids were coming out of jail, pleading to stuff that now their whole life has changed. So we did this organization called Discovery for Justice. It took 2.5 years. We lobbied, we demonstrated, we had forums, we went to Albany many times, and it took us 2.5 years and we passed the law. It's called open discovery. The district attorneys now must give evidence within, I think, 30 days of a booking. So if somebody accuses you of something, the district attorney has to submit the evidence. This is what we have against your client. And you can tell, hey, if they got this on you, buddy, probably that they're in, you know? So like, either we wait for trial or you plead guilty now, man, because you're going to be found guilty. Look at the evidence they got. Or they can say, this is bullshit. You ain't got no fucking evidence on this kid. Boom, boom, and you negotiate with the freaking DA. Yo, you really want to go to trial on this? Because I'll hammer you, bro. This is bullshit. DA says, okay, you know what? Let that one go. Save the taxpayer money. But again, follow the money. Who's making money? Who's making money? You got private jails now. How do they make money? Well, guess what? Our kids are the crop. So they will arrest as many as possible because you got to have those jails full. If you don't have those jails full, somebody's not making money. So everything from freaking correction officers to judges to security guards and mostly upstate New York. Because after Rikers, if you're going to be there for 2.5 years or something, you plead guilty, guess what? You're going to prison. This is not a prison. This is a jail, Rikers. But a prison is when you go upstate. So if you have a little town like bullshit America, upstate New York, you have a population of 8,000. And you got a population in prison of, let's say, 2,000. So technically, the population of that little town is not 5,000. It's 7,000. You got to add. Those who are in that prison are part of that. You know how the New York State budget gets distributed? Based on population. So if you have a population of 5,000 in this particular little town, right? You get enough money for 5,000 for your roads, for your fire department, for your police department, whatever. But if you can add 2,000 more that are not walking the streets, but they're there, technically they are part of your population. So even the town benefits. Everybody benefits. So that's why I always say follow the money. So when we're able to prove all this thing and show to the Republicans, which are the ones that were holding it on the Senate side. We passed it eventually on the Assembly side, but it was held up on the Senate, which is much more conservative. But when we were able to show the Senate side, wait a minute, you guys are fiscally conservative. How can you be fiscally conservative when you know that we're spending all this money on bullshit? If we didn't have this, you wouldn't be spending that much money on this. And when that comes out clear, then they jumped on our bandwagon and we were able to pass it in the Senate, especially when we had Thompson, an African American who became the chairperson of the Senate. Between that and the ones we were able to lobby, both houses passed the law and we passed it. But here's the problem. That was under an umbrella of a whole bunch of, what do they call? I forgot the technical name for that, which is, reform. The reform of the criminal justice system. And under that reform, they passed no bail, little bail. They passed a whole bunch of stuff about who gets arrested and who not get arrested. So all that package passed together, not just what we pushed for, which was discovery of evidence. So now you have people coming out. You got high brass police officers that are pissed because now you're cutting back on their salaries. You're cutting back on their overtime. You're cutting back on a lot of shit. You can't now be a fucking rookie and out there and arresting people, because after a while it's gonna come out. How come you only, arrest these guys? Here's a true example. I go to a community meeting and I bring up some issues at this. Every month the police department has to have a meeting with the community. And I go to all those. I'm the president of the Homeowners Association here. I go to these meetings. I go to this meeting in Lincoln Hospital where the police department of the 40th precinct is bringing out these presentations. And they give these nice glorified reports. We arrested this many, we did this, and they give you donuts, and they give you coffee. So a lot of the seniors love to go to that shit because you get a free donut, you get some coffee, right? And they'll give you this report, and everybody's start copying because the cops are doing a good job. I raised my freaking hand and said, wait a minute, if you're doing a good job, how come this is this and this? So for me, they have to ask us some questions, and then they try to gloss over it, say, oh, Mr. Pabon, we're going to look at this. And I'm ready to walk out. This one guy goes up to me and said, yo, can I talk to you a minute? He's an undercover cop, a lieutenant, Boricua. He tells me, yo, let me tell you something. You're the only one, bro, that's touching this shit. This is real. This is bullshit. Those reports that they give me, man, is just bullshit. It's just tapioca to get people quiet. But let me tell you what's happening. I work undercover and have a squad. And I go around and I've been following this particular, group in the South Bronx. Because I want to know, one, where they're getting the guns from and where they're getting the drugs from. And I've been observing them. We have a van. We go out there. We've been checking out. I'm getting closer and closer. And I'm constantly getting fucking harassed from my supervisors. Yo, when are you going to bring in a collar? When are you going to bring in a collar? When are you going to bring in a collar? I'm saying, yo, relax, man. I don't just want to bring in a collar. I want to bring in, the source. He says, we busted a guy. One guy, he had a gun. The serial number is erased. That's a good collar. I bring him in, and I'm signing him up. My captain comes over to me, and a freaking rookie brought in 12 individuals from the basketball courts. And this captain comes up to me and taps on the shoulder and says, that's a collar. He said, what? So I bring in a guy that has a gun, that's the serial number has been erased. And that's not a collar? But this son of a bitch who comes in with 12 kids, man, that he picked up in the freaking projects because they had a joint or because they had a nickel back, that's a collar? Yeah, because each one of them is overtime. You're bringing in one guy. That's how the system worked. He said, bro, I am so frustrated, I'm going back to Afghanistan. He says, I'm quitting. I'm going back. So he'd rather go to, he says, I'd rather deal with the bullshit in Afghanistan than to deal with the bullshit that's going on in my community because they don't let me do my job. And that's only one of several stories that I've heard from police officers who just could not take it. And that's how Discovery for Justice was formed. I'm happy that we were able to pass it, but unfortunately, because it passed under the umbrella of many other reforms, and one of them was the fact about the no bail or low bail, because a case like that, Jamal would not have been arrested and put in prison. He's a kid. He didn't have $5,000. So now there's a law that will protect a kid like that, right? You don't put him in Rikers, right? But unfortunately, those who are against bail reform or against this other stuff mix that all up with that. The reason there's so much crime is because of the fact that, these new laws that were passed. Well, let me tell you something about the new laws. First of all, I know because I have people inside who were telling me they were basically leaning back. Let it happen. Let it happen. The more pressure goes out with the fact that all this shit is going on, maybe they'll change those laws, right? Because it's affecting their pockets. So they're, from the high brass all the way down, from judges all the way down, from correction officers all the way down, from small towns, conservatives upstate New York down. Everybody was being affected by this. So you know what? How can we do it? Let's try to rescind that law. Let's try to change that law. So I know for a fact, because I have friends who were inside who were telling me, bro, they were telling us, yo, look the other way. Look the other way. So they were allowing that. Number one. Number two, a lot of that crime that's happening, especially after COVID, these are not criminals. No, they're not criminals. The guy who, hit somebody with a hammer, the guy who pushed someone into the train, the one that, broke those windows and the one that cut that person's face. Yeah, they were arrested and then they were released. And the New York Post writes all the story about this guy was arrested 5 times. And look, now the 5th time he came and he cut that person's face. And then the 5th time he came, he did that. Nobody researched the fact that's not a fucking criminal. That's a mentally ill person that should have been not in the streets. He should have been in a hospital a while back. But because after the Willow Book decree that Gerardo Rivera, Jerry Rivers put out back then, they closed those big institutions. And part of the agreement was that they were going to close those institutions that were really inhumane to a lot of mental health patients, and they were going to bring them down to size so that they can be in a smaller situation, possibly in a home with only maybe a 50 or 60, as opposed to 3,000 or 4,000, and therefore they get the better care, and you can help resolve their issues. Well, those centers were never built. Those centers were never put out. Money never came through. So they closed major mental health facilities, never supplied the alternative, and you have all types of crazies out there. And then after COVID, and I don't want to be a conspiratorial guy, but I don't know, maybe the vaccine or some shit. All I know is that after COVID, I've seen people with less patience. I've seen more people in the streets get down mentally not right. I've seen guys talking to themselves. I see, and they don't have no earbuds, and they don't have no freaking headphones, but they're walking the streets, screaming on 149th Street, walking the streets todavía con the tag from the hospital with the gown. Todavía they just left the hospital walking with slippers on 149th Street. I've never seen that type of stuff. I've been in the trains. I see the people that are there. Man, it's crazy. So you have a lot of individuals, and here's the thing. A police officer gets called. Particular individual, a little bit Looney Tune, right? Did something crazy. Broke a window, broke a store window, got into an argument with a freaking store. He went to try to get something, or he was trying to beg some money and they don't let him. And he came and he got real stupid with a particular person, right? They call the police. They arrest him. My friends tell me, nobody, when they brought him to the precinct, nobody asked, are you on medication? Because what you did is kind of crazy. Nobody asked. It's a collar. He says, there's a law that allows me not to bring him to. Once I bring him in, don't book him. You can tell something's wrong with this dude. This guy is fidgety. This guy is, acting a certain way, So instead of booking him, I take him to a Lincoln Mental Health. And in mental health, they'll handcuff him and they'll observe him and they'll deal with him. He says, that's where he belongs. He said, you know what the problem is, Julio? I said, what? I don't get a collar for that. I don't get a collar. I get a collar if I book him. So why take him to a mental health hospital when you know he belongs there? And the problem is, once you book him, it's like flushing someone down the toilet, bro. It goes through a system, bro. That's just too late. He has to go through the system now. And the system could mean, he'll be in Rikers somewhere. He'll be talking to himself, put him in solitary confinement. Boom, 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 boom. He goes before a judge. They see whatever. They let him loose again. He says, but this guy should not be loose. He should have been in the hospital. So when you put that whole situation together, that's what we have, unfortunately, out there. But people don't do their research. People follow the misinformation. They believe the press, which is the worst thing. Corporate news, there's no such thing as corporate news. Nobody does investigative journalism anymore. So basically, whatever they hear on TV, oh, there's so much crime in New York City. And it's because the fact that they're letting these prisoners out early. These people get arrested, and the judges are just releasing them to the streets again. Nobody's questioning how many of them are mentally ill that shouldn't be, in prison. First of all, should have been in the hospital. Why don't we put some money in the hospitals, and why don't we put some money back into where they belong? Nobody wants to talk about that problem, because as long as you put this hysteria and you put fear in people, when you put fear in people, people will do anything. So if you need to rescind those laws, rescind them. If you need to, arrest more people, you need to hire more cops as opposed to hiring more counselors. Why don't they hire some counselors and put them in the precincts so that when you bring in a prisoner, not only does the cop who arrested him gets to talk to this prisoner, but maybe a counselor who's a psych major or something can talk to this dude and tell the cop, before you book him, this guy doesn't belong here. This guy belongs in a hospital. But they don't have that. But unfortunately, we are our worst enemies, because what happened? What was the rhetoric about, ending the police? Defund the police? That's the worst freaking thing you can say. who came up with that. I believe that was an agent in the movement that said, yeah, man, we need to defund the police. And everybody, they follow the rhetoric. They don't study. They don't do whatever. Yeah, man, that's true. We should defund the police. Bro, that's crazy. Nobody, especially seniors who vote, they ain't going for that shit. Instead of saying defund the police, why don't you say relocate resources? We need to reallocate resources from the police department. Take a lot of that chunk of money, instead of buying all the freaking tanks and buying the robot, dogs and buying all this shit and buying the, sophisticated weapons, like if this New York City is going to be invaded. Why don't you take a chunk of that money and invest it and hire counselors and hire psych majors and hire a triage system so that they can be triaged the proper way in both areas, both criminality and mental health. Hire some people to be in the precinct. Just like you had to hire interpreters at one point, well, now hire someone that can help understand if this person belongs in a mental institution or they belong in prison. Something simple as that. But no, nobody thought about that. No elected officials promoted that. Not any of our own elected officials that I know of promoted that, because they all swallowed the freaking Kool-Aid. And that's because you commit fear into people, people will react out of fear. And that's one of the biggest problems that we have today with the criminal justice system in New York City, which is why, a lot of people are reacting to what's going on today in terms of the crime in the streets.